All right. Okay. Hello, world. Here we are at another lovely Node.js tooling meeting. And, oh no, I hate it when, jeez. So when I start the live stream, it like pulls up the live stream and I see myself talking, delayed by a few seconds, and it's very off-putting. Anyhow, I got rid of that. And here is, let's see, might be worth pulling up these meeting notes. This is a Google Doc. I will share the link in the chat. And there's that Google Doc. One thing that I left off of this agenda was SHUtil stuff. So might as well start with that one. So last meeting, I guess I should pull up the last meeting. It was suggested that we look into like Python's SHUtil module, because there's a lot of stuff in there that we feel it would make sense to have in Node Core. And so that's where, if you're unfamiliar, that's where Python's version of like rimraf lives, right? There's also a copy tree function and a couple of other things. And I am going to guess there hasn't really been any movement here, but I don't know. Has there been?
So I was hoping to have a PR ready for this meeting, but I don't. So I guess you are correct. But I definitely will before the next meeting.
Okay. Well, and so this is essentially, this is going to be I refresh my memory about what exactly it was going to look like. It was going to be a new built-in.
Yeah, the plan I think that we agreed on was that it would be built-in library called SHUtil. And initially, I was only going to implement rimtree, would be largely based on the code in rimraf minus the globbing, I think was the, and no like CLI utility like it has.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, I don't know if there's anything else to really discuss there. If there's, just work to be done on it, right? Yeah.
So I mentioned the general idea of incrementally doing stuff based on SHUtil's design, and I got thumbs up. People are not, they prefer us copying a mature API over inventing our own.
Do you ran this by a few collaborators or something?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, that is good. It's better than what I expected. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. My initial plan was to just do rimtree because I wanted to get something up to get some feedback to see if people were like, no, we hate this, stop doing this.
Mm. All right, so let me just write this down then. Okay. And you know what? I think we can take like take rimraf off of this list then, since it kind of folds into this task. Okay, so anything else on the shutil front that we want to discuss there?
Not that I can think of.
All right. So next thing would be argument parsing. So what I did since last meeting was I made a kind of this like big ass comparison table of all of the most popular, at least by my judgment, the most popular argument parsing modules out there in userland. And this is issue 19, so argument parsing. And then down the page, here is the comment itself. So down there, Bone Skull 6 days ago, argument parser analysis. And so what this is I basically went through NPM, searched for a couple keywords, and got essentially a list of what I felt were the most popular unique argument parsing libraries. Some of the popular ones consume other ones on this list, and so I left them out. They may enhance some of these, but essentially I had to draw the line somewhere. For example, like Yargs is going to have more features than Yargs parser, but I didn't want to just duplicate everything. So there's 9 on this list. They're roughly in order of popularity. I think Commander might actually be the most widely used one, but I went through and just picked some common features of these to kind of just get a feeling for what they're doing. Some of the less widely supported features I left out, just because I don't know. I mean, again, I could probably just spend weeks and weeks doing this and doing every single little thing, and I didn't want to do that. So I picked some. If you scroll down to this comparison matrix, you're going to see that all of them, and this is what all of them do. And I think what we want to do with this research was kind of get an idea of what people are using now and what people are doing now, and so there's a precedent if we want to push forward with something. So because there's so many different ways to do argument parsing and people have different ideas about how it should work, I think it's important to just kind of go with what is popular, essentially. So all of these 9 modules, they all do a few things. One of them is they all return the arguments in some sort of object. And again, people may have different ideas about how that should be done, what that object should look like, but they all do it. There may be others that are less popular that don't give you an object back. I don't know, but that's what these all do. They have a notion of types. That may be as simple as Boolean and string types. In fact, it is. Some of them will support number types, some of them won't, some of them will even differentiate between floats and integers, but at bare minimum, they have an idea of, they have some notion of types, and they at minimum support a string type, and so that is an option with some sort of value attached to it, and a Boolean type, which is essentially a flag. So if it's present, then it's yes. If it's not present, then it's no, or true or false. So they all allow you to use an option prefix of dash or double dash. So, I mean, yeah, there's no Yeah, on Windows, for example, you might encounter tools that expect a forward slash or something like that. I didn't see anything like that. Maybe some of them do, but I couldn't find it referenced anywhere. So evidently, it's not very popular. And so that's kind of what we can infer. Where there have been exceptions or weirdness, I've tried to add a little note about it. It looks like the equals, so like foo equals bar is widely supported. It is just kind of unclear from the documentation on command line args and bossy whether if that is actually supported, because I didn't actually go and download it and try it out myself. That's what I would need to do, because it wasn't mentioned in the documentation anywhere. It's probably safe to I don't think it's safe to assume they do, but it's likely that they do. I just couldn't confirm it, just because it's such a popular way to do this. So that's kind of the idea. I just wanted to see where userland was at right now with this, and what we could use as kind of a bare minimum functionality for something like this. So what do you think?
I think it's a positive data point. It seems like there is sort of consensus, and at least subsets. Like there's no obvious contradictions, at least in this group. Like something that separates, that turns it into not a subset of the whole.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I think like a forward slash, which I'm not in favor of.
No. I think that the thing that the place I would expect there to be conflict would be in clustered arguments, where you do like -ABC, and that means -A space -B space -C to some of them, and to others I would expect that to mean --ABC.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, there's like multiplicity. Can you pass multiple arguments? How do you do that? Do you add the flag multiple times, or do you put the comma after the equal sign? Maybe that's, but I think all of that is like TBD. Like we don't have to support all of those.
Yeah, I mean, we can essentially just treat is like, well, this flag showed up by, here's the list of places where that flag showed up, and I guess that would be the other one, is passing in values to double dash flags. Yeah, supporting equals is pretty universally supported. Supporting not having equals seems to be the corner case there.
As far as I could tell, every one of these didn't require the equals.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like that's assumed. If you declare the type as a string, you have to give it something.
That does make sense.
What is command? The call?
Oh, command. So, right. So positional, I'll just explain this quickly. So positional is something that you can specify that doesn't have an option before it. Typically, this might be a file name. So if you're in like Mocha, foo.js, foo.js is your positional argument. Commands, think like git commands. So it's git, some subcommand, and then you pass a bunch of arguments, and that's what a command is. It looks like also aliases are pretty well supported. Sometimes there's a restriction on how many you can have, but they all support some notion of aliases. Yeah. To be clear, down below in the types comparison, count means if you say like dash v dash v dash v, that would be the value of v would be 3. Variadic meaning you can supply the same thing multiple times. So if there was a flag, dash dash file, you could say dash dash file foo dash dash file bar dash dash, and you would get back, I don't know, an array or something like that.
So just you didn't hit it, but we have that implemented in the Node binary argument parser. We have implication. Like if you pass enable, CA roots, you have to supply CA root path. But again, that's an advanced picture.
Yeah. Some Yarg's parser, I think, gets really fancy with it, where you can define something as a string, but expect like multiple tokens afterwards. But again, I think that's, it's not widely supported, so it didn't make the cut. Rebecca, to what you said, down below in this thread, Sam brought up, well, what about dash ABC if you want to combine flags in this POSIX compliant manner? Like the most typical example of that I see is using tar, for example. So you'll say tar zxvf. That could be tar dash z dash blah 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 blah. So that again, while it is POSIX compliant, it's not seemingly widely supported by these tools, which suggests to me that it's just not that important to people. To each their own. Obviously, if you expect something to work that way, well, maybe you're from Unix land, and that's how you expect command lines to work. But it just so happens not everybody who uses Node is on a POSIX OS. So
although they would expect you to be using a /
yeah.
Insofar as actually making it feel like a Windows app. But Windows doesn't really have a CLI culture, so I think that's part of the reason no one has insisted, because they're like, you made us use a CLI that you've already done the damage.
Right.
Just one note on the equals thing is that Node itself requires the equals. You can't just put a space and then the value for all of its arguments.
Nowadays, it's easy to fix. We have only one. We've managed to narrow it down to only one actual binary parser. There is, and in Windows land, there is a shift a little bit from / to minus, like PowerShell text minus, and the Visual C toolchain now accepts minuses, so it's getting better. Although it's a single minus instead of double dash. But still, I think that as a whole, this table is a great argument for saying there is consensus. It's not too opinionated to have this. Almost everybody is of the same opinion. If we put this in core, nobody will shout, bloody murder.
Right. If anybody's going to scream bloody murder, it's because it's missing a certain feature. It's not because it's doing something that they believe to be is completely wrong. Because, as you said, there are no conflicts here. There's no incompatibilities. It's all some subset of this wider set of features.
So in that, and then everybody could always npm install their favorite extended feature package. So I think, in general, this has been a positive excursion that we can go ahead and attempt this.
So do you think then maybe So I would say let's take the things that are common between all these implementations, or almost entirely present, and um, I mean, is it? Let's send a PR for a new built-in for that. I mean, I think maybe that's the most straightforward way to do it. That doesn't. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question, which is the goal that argument parsers, that more complicated or sophisticated argument parsers should be built off of this, or is that this is a minimal stand-in that you can use for simple tools?
Both. I think
Both.
Ben said he'd be happy to, reduce the amount of code in Yards.
Because I don't think, like, if I was writing this, I don't think my design would be the same for those two different goals. Like, if I'm building this to be built off of, then I want it to expose, like, the parsing to sit, like, literally, like, here's the list of stuff I got in the order I got it. You decide what you want to do with it.
So in that, I think that's a secondary. I think.
Yeah.
I think, my understanding is that the primary goal is to have something decent out of the box. For people who don't want fancy arg parsing, like the use case is you build a tool that takes one argument, and then something comes in, and you need to take a second argument, and suddenly you have your own argument parser. Instead of from the get-go, having something, just using it, and then replacing it later on.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would say absolutely both of those are goals, but the highest priority is just let's get something that works out of the box for these simple cases, and it's not so simple that it's useless. And I think if we take a subset of these features, it won't be useless.
I think that's a great idea. I'm thinking at Google right now for our code samples, we're actually removing yargs because it requires people install yargs to run our code samples. So having something like this, we would probably immediately use for just simple code samples and stuff like that. From the point of view of yargs parser, I mean, yargs is more of a visual library. Yargs parser is the actual parsing bit. Like, I would certainly try to carve out most of yargs parser and maybe try to close the delta, but it would be nice to rip out the guts of it.
I suspect that most more complicated libraries like yargs will continue to have to do all of their own parsing, but having a baseline, just because it's difficult to expose that in a way that's useful if you want to make different parsing decisions.
I think that, yeah, but I do think the baseline is useful from the point of view of just code samples on the internet, and just like don't have to install a dependency to do anything, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like this seems like a solid addition. It would make all of our lives better.
And again, from a little bit of a different perspective, I've been working on a lot of the Node core tooling, which is Python because of bootstrapping. Almost every one of those tools, if you look at the Git history, there's like one argument added, then the second argument added, and now I'm just putting arg parser and everything, and cutting down code and unifying. So it makes a ton of sense. From a tooling perspective, that's
my only concern would be that we create an argument in the Node.js issue tracker for the rest of eternity of people coming in and asking for more and more complex argument parsing features. So I just wonder how we prevent that.
So from what I'm seeing, or at least the answer I'm giving for people who come with this is derived from the small core perspective. Does the feature in core give a significant amount of benefit over having it as a userland module? If it can be easily implemented as a userland, I point to like a very good library that does it. And there's not a lot of like this incremental feature requests persisting. It happens, people come with requests, but if there's like a good answer, which is, this is our philosophy, here's a simple solution for your problem, that usually resolves those issues.
Cool.
I think
that kind of answers my.
I was going to say, I think communicating a limited scope is the central conceit there. Like being clear on what the actual edge of the scope is, so that it's easy to say, that's a great feature, and you will want that in some programs, but it doesn't belong in core.
Unless you make something really that makes a ton of sense,
yeah,
and get consensus, or if somebody decides to actually submit a PR and not a feature request, that's a different kind of conversation.
Yeah, I was almost wondering, it may be a conversation worth having in more detail elsewhere, but would we consider adding this into a standard modules namespace? Like, I wonder if this has benefit as a standard module. I'm just having this on my mind because I've been talking to Daniel Ehrenberg about TC39 wanting to standardize on some modules. I wonder if we could move it into a written standards document, and then it kind of moves the argument away from the node issue tracker, which could be nice, right?
I would love that. I had dreams about all sorts of modules like file system and cert and things but writing standardese is hard.
Yeah, I think we're I don't want to change the topic of conversation, but we're kind of doing an experimental one right now with UUID v4 just to see what it's like to work with them and write a document for it. There's a learning curve. Like I don't want to advocate that that's what we do for everything in the tooling working group at this time.
All right. So, I mean, what I'd like to do, if possible, and I think it's possible, is to when we implement this, I don't want to do it in such a way where it is you can't hack at it. So yeah, I want to prioritize, hey, this should work out of the box, should be easy to use. But if there's maybe a class or something that a user could go and subclass and overwrite the behavior, I mean, maybe that would suffice for people to get started. I don't know. Maybe that's just too tough to do properly. But of course, then maybe it just could be, well, we'll have this class internally. We won't expose it for now until we're sure about what this like hackable API could look like. Because I would like, library authors to be able to build on top of it, but I also don't want to design a stupid API on accident because that's really easy to do.
I was going to say, even if we don't like do the full-on try to write a TC39 standards approach, maybe start with a README document that just describes the perfect world and a few of us noodle on, or not the perfect world, but like, describe the API and the abstract to a certain degree and what extension would look like, et cetera, et cetera. Write a design document, because it's probably going to be pretty easy to actually program the command line parser. So more interesting maybe to talk about caveats like how you extend it in a text document.
Yeah, but you probably know better than most that there are decisions or like opinions that you do even at the parsing level. Like what do you do with a token that starts with a single minus but has multiple characters? Is it a single token? multiple tokens. So, like there are opinions all throughout the process.
How about right? No. I mean, what Rebecca said. It was like, if I was going to prioritize this, I'd do it one way and that the other. What if we did something like, okay, I will, like, I don't know, maybe just send the PR, but we can have this proof of concept. Okay, this is the easy to consume way, and then I'd like to see like what Rebecca or whoever would come up with if they were doing it. Let's write this for library authors. I don't know. Maybe that's too much work.
I mean, we could keep I'd just say let's keep it to a design document, not code to start. But like we could keep it amongst ourselves as a private document and save the bike shedding until later. Like I understand where you're coming from.
This is simple enough, Ben, that I kind of feel like running code would help us. But I think you're right. I think it should be a smaller discussion. But like for the, like if I wanted to have something that was maximally consumable by things, then it would be like a token stream is what it would produce. And then and then you process that token stream, and it's done some pre-processing on it. So it's a little better than just an array of, things that came in from the shell. But yeah, I think we need some.
Well,
both of those are good. Both of those would be good, I think.
Is there a userland argument parser that parses a token stream? Like, does it actually make a stream out of the array and then?
Well, I wouldn't actually suggest making a stream out of it because that would be terrible. It would just make an array.
That's what I thought you meant. I'm like, wait, what?
Conceptually, a stream. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
I think my slight leaning right now is towards I think this is your point too, Chris, is like the super simple one that, as I said, like cleans up just code examples throughout the world and maybe just try to keep it as constrained as we conceivably can. And maybe as nice as it would be to delete Yarg's parser, maybe Rebecca's right that shouldn't be the goal of the project.
I think like there's room for go one, go two. As in agile design, we do go one because we think it's like the MVP, and then we see if there's a need for go two or pivot.
That seems reasonable to me.
Yeah.
So I would love to hit, to tackle that, but up to my any organ in in tooling, and I need to get like a lot done for version 12 or ASAP. But after that, I would be happy to do this because I've been playing with that recently a lot.
Now I could probably make time to work on this as well.
I can justify it being part of my job probably because of our samples issues at work. So I can pitch in.
Got a bunch of time on my hands now.
Rebecca might be winning in terms of time.
We'll see, but
yeah, I want to do it, but I mean, if there's somebody that has more time on their hands, go for it. Yeah, I'm sure I can fill my time with other stuff. So, all right, well.
I was going to say though, action item. Why doesn't someone create a private repo and invite interested parties to it just to start a conversation and write a README? Whoever wants to own it.
Sure.
I'm definitely interested in helping out, but I kind of have my hands full with the SH util thing at the moment. So please invite me though. Also, I have to take off early today to get to a meeting. So thanks everyone. I'll see you next time.
All right, later, Ian.
See you, Ian.
All right, yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll just make that repo somewhere and invite whoever. So I'll invite Ben. I'll invite everybody still here, essentially.
So Ian doesn't get invited because he left early. Sorry. I'm joking. Yeah.
With RM3, so.
Kidding.
Yeah. I'll invite him too, but I won't expect him to do anything. So everybody else, you're on the hook. So, all right. Well, that's good. I'm glad to see that kind of coming together. There's the other thing on this list is shims. I don't think we need anything right now. I'm always interested what's going to happen with this whole namespacing thing, but that seems to have been tabled, or just nobody's really working on it, and I haven't paid attention to it. And I don't know. Maybe Raphael, you know better than I do, but
is this the standard modules namespacing stuff, or
yeah?
Yeah, I mean, now it is apparently. I think that was part of the issue. Is like, we wanted to. Somebody wanted to use like a Node.js npm namespace, or I don't even know what. And then
so the decision is to use it, but everybody's ignoring it. So there are like a couple, I think like 3 or 4 new modules added since the decision, which are unnamespaced. But I think if we do one and we namespace it, nobody will be too surprised.
So to be clear, that would be something like in chat here.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll find the end, like, is it an @ or a hash mark, or but TLDR, that's it.
Okay.
It's like Unicode snowman and a colon.
Is there a Unicode bike shed?
It's a poop emoji. All right. Okay. So yeah. But anyhow, so somebody should do something with that maybe and just see what happens. Send that PR with hey, I'm using this namespace. Look at me, neener, and see what people do. So maybe it'll open the floodgates. Maybe it'll be terrible. Who knows? But I don't think we need any shims for now. So
there is an interesting development. Chokidar has refactored out a bunch of their code and based what's left on an API. So they turned themselves into a shim, which is nice.
They did what?
They refactored out a lot of their internal code, and they're reusing new Node.js core functionality, and they wrapped it around an API, which gives a better upgrade guarantee. You don't have to recompile it every time. So essentially, they turn themselves into a shim. But for me, that's a success story. When
that's awesome.
Functionality becomes so common that it goes upstream, and then the module becomes a shim. That's great.
Maybe a similar topic of conversation. I had a conversation this week that came about at work about why we were using execa or cross spawn at this point. Like, what's the actual delta? Like, why don't we just make spawn work on or exec work on Windows properly. So I had this big long conversation about what the actual deltas are, and there's like, I don't know, 10 things that don't work well on Windows, and execa or spawn sync are shimming. Some of them just feel like bugs. Like I feel like there's a lot of work that could be done around spawning. Worth having on our mind.
Yeah, I went negative on one of those, I assume, yesterday. There is sort of an issue left behind from a small core, which is some of the APIs look like system calls, exec and spawn and fork. They're not really high-end consumable APIs in their design. And I think that's the problem. So for instance, when you do exec, is like for spawning a new shell, default shell behavior in POSIX and in Windows have slight differences. Windows does not assume that the new shell replaces the old shell. Windows starts with with -x, like with verbosity, and POSIX doesn't. And so having the system call be opinionated is a little bit problematic. The same with shebangs. Nobody assumes there's a shebang in a Windows file and that it has any meaning. So I would say one of those, execa or the others should be a new thing with the opinions built in, because fixing those bugs is going to be very surprising for a lot of people.
That seems fair. I think it's also surprising to people that if they pick up, like Node's supposed to be a cross-platform platform, or that's a bad way to, it's supposed to be a multi-operating system platform. It's pretty confusing that if I pick up something from the core API that it's not going to work on Windows. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I just wonder how one might name that API so that people are like, oh, I should just use this because the other ones don't actually work. Like you just call it like good spawn or something, like
yeah,
compromise spawn.
We have a ton of bad metaphors like child process, and then if you want to end that child, you have to do some violent verb to it, which is it's a weird metaphor. And like having something new and a little bit opinionated but uniform, I think would be nice. It might.
I don't hate that.
It might even fit into the SHUTL namespace because it's not a system call. It's like it's a utility. It gives you uniformity over different systems.
Yeah, that feels more appropriate to me. Like SHUTL, that feels like the right place for this kind of thing.
Yeah, because the differences are mostly around spawning a new shell, and the shells are very different.
Right.
Like you can spawn a new process fairly uniformly if you don't assume shell commands, verbosity, shebangs, things like that. Things that there's a straight up with this.
So you're saying just kind of be more opinionated, like don't try to hit all these edge cases.
Yeah. Like say, and write it out. This is it gives you this and this and this, and we don't assume any other inherited behavior from the operating system. Like we parse the shebang, and we do our thing. We start with verbosity off by design, not by default. And we put everything as an argument, and then you can control it. Like you can hook, maybe, you hook the shebang parsing. You can put a flag for verbosity. You can pass if you need. If you really want to spawn a shell, you can pass the shell and its arguments. Because right now, like yesterday, what I was talking about, like if you want to spawn CMD on Windows, it starts with /s/d and /c. You want to start with /q, which is shock minus x plus x. You can't. All those sorts of things are baked in to core and are unhookable, and they are there by default and not by design.
I kind of like that this might dovetail with the really simple argument parser, because one thing I think that's nicer about the exec API, correct me if I'm wrong, but the spawn API takes a second argument of an array of options passed to it, whereas the exec can just take a string which will be executed.
Yeah.
Like having an actual executed string is in a lot of cases nicer if we can standardize on what that actually means.
Yes, like how do you parse it? And again, don't delegate it to the operating system. Do your own parsing by design and make that design explicit and document it. I think eventually it will reduce friction.
Nice. Yeah, it sounds like something like maybe just an eventual thing to have on our minds.
All right. Okay. So, I think that's pretty much it. So does anybody else have anything they want to bring up?
One last thing. It's a little immature, but I have been talking to Daniel Ehrenberg about his idea of putting a module in the standard space and seeing how we're talking about putting UUID in a standard module space in the browser, because it's used by like 350,000 different repos and is a really simple API and seems like a good candidate for a standard module. So I don't know. I think.
What is it? What's its logic?
It's called UUID. It's based on an RFC for unique identifier generation. Yeah. Daniel thought it was a good candidate for a standard module. He wants to advocate that some of these incredibly popular building block modules could be good standards. So we're kind of writing up a document about this with the people who wrote UUID. I can share more about this in our next meeting. It's just started. We just are starting to rough out the document. But,
is it GUID compatible?
No, UUID, and it's
I'm saying is the output GUID compatible?
It's based on RFC. Is it 4112?
Yeah, 4122.
4122. Yeah.
They're related to UIDs, but they're not the same.
Yeah. And people apparently mostly use the V4 one, which is just random entropy, or there's, I think the V1 one is popular as well. And a couple of the other ones are pretty proprietary. But it's just an interesting experiment. Like, I wonder if like some of the real building block modules in NPM that have, are essentially used by everyone. I wonder if some of them could be a good standard library candidates. It's probably not a good thing to bring up in the last 5 minutes.
Right.
No, it's great. I need something like that for JIT, for Visual Studio compatibility.
So by standard module, we're talking, so it's not language level, but runtimes would be expected to implement it, or
it would potentially be browser level. So it might be in the V8 engine and the whatever. It might be at engine level potentially, because it would be put forward as a TC39 specification.
So like the part of the web platform, like URL and
yeah.
Okay.
This is the idea. I'm curious to see what pushback we get, because like to me, like the benefit is like some of these things are so wildly popular, one should almost think of them as a building block. Like the UUID is used by 350,000 repos. Like that's almost universally used for making these little identifiers. There's some other modules like that that are really simple little utilities used by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of libraries. I'm just thinking if a standard module namespace is something that is going to happen, why not use the giant corpus of NPM to do some statistical analysis of what people are actually doing with JavaScript, rather than try to invent a new standard module set of APIs. Like we've been running this experiment for 10 years that shows what people need.
I have a feeling a lot of people using it don't really need it. But I guess that's neither here nor there.
It's just easy. Yeah, that's fair. And that might be the case with a lot of modules.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but eventually like console turned into a web platform standard, which is nice. I'm dreaming of assert. I think assert should be a standard module. At least somebody should like standardize its semantics.
Yeah. I mean, the benefit is like take UUID. If you were to use math.random, it's not actually secure. You need to use a secure source of entropy. So there's moving things to a platform level. You can help protect people from implementation mistakes. So for things like cryptography and unique identification and things where they're pretty simple algorithms but have footguns that could make applications that are not as good, I think they can be potentially good candidates for standardization. It's also kind of frightening to just pull one module into a standard module namespace. Like I'd like to understand what the goal is, and because everyone's talking about that we're gonna have an @standard namespace and we're gonna use it for putting things into. Like there's a lot of open questions to me. So I should have brought this up. I'll bring this up as a more major topic in the next meeting. And I'll show up 20 minutes earlier.
All right. Okay. So, hey, Rebecca, which thing exactly was broken on that calendar link?
It may have the calendar link. It looks like maybe the way of viewing this after it's live. I'm not sure. It was the webinar link in the calendar.
Right.
Which I was expecting to join with, and
I got a more ominous. I got account not paid message.
Were you when you clicked it, or are you logged in as somebody, or?
Yeah, as me, but
interesting. Rebecca, were you logged in when you clicked it?
It didn't actually open Zoom. Yeah, I guess I was logged in. I have a sign out link. Yeah, not enable webinar feature 1,122. That's what happens when I visit this link, which is what was in the calendar.
Okay. Yeah. Possible to like send a screen grab?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, cool. All right, so I think that's all we got. We will see you in 3 weeks, and have a nice rest of your day. And bye-bye, everybody.
See you.